Welcome to me, Kamchi Israel. Have you ever thought about the spiritual power of your ears? Not your voice, not your eyes, and not your heart, just your ears. What we allow to enter and what we choose to block out can shape the very core of who we are. In this week's Parashat, we're introduced to a curious name in the census of the tribes, the Otzni Mishpahat HaOtzni, the family of Ozni, but Rashi is puzzled. He says, and I quote, "This is the family of Etzbon, yet I don't know why they're not called by his name. Why the mystery? Why abandon the original name Etzbon and rename the tribe Ozni?" The Shlach HaKadosh opens a breathtaking window. He draws from the Gemara in Ketubot, which asks, why are our fingers shaped like poles? So that is, if we hear something inappropriate, we can block our ears. It's not biology, it's not design. It's divine design. Borei Olam crafted the human form so that our very own hands could guard our inner sanctum. And now we understand. Shevet Gad, the tribe of Etzbon, had every excuse to fall. They were surrounded by neighbors like Shevet Ruvain and Shevet Shimon, homes to Datan and Aviram, to the 250 rebellious men, to Zimri, who brought a national plague, and yet Shevet Gad stood strong. But why? Because they knew how to block their ears. They knew how to keep the poison out. They were Etzbon, from the Etzba, the finger, the tribe that used their hands not to fight, not to grasp, but to protect their hearing. But now, years later, after the noise has quieted, the Torah renames them Ozni, from Ozen, an ear. Because once the influence of wickedness is silenced, the ear can fully do what it was created for, not just to block, but to listen. To hear the whispers of Kedusha, to absorb the words of Borei Olam. And with that, let me share with you a story. Not about a tribe, but about one boy, about one pair of ears that refused to listen to a father's rage and instead opened themselves to eternity. His name was Yair. Yair's upbringing was meticulously secular. His parents worked tirelessly to shield him from even a trace of Torah. They weren't simply indifferent to Yiddishkeit, they were allergic to it, determined that their son grow up free from what they saw as primitive and backward. But Borei Olam, in his own quiet ways of calling a soul home, when Yair came of age, he began helping his father in his produce business. He was driving a delivery truck across the north. One of his regular stops was to Yeshiva Lev V'Nefesh, a small yeshiva filled with mostly Ba'alei Teshuvah. The joy, the sincerity, the sense of purpose had pulsed through its halls, and it struck something deep inside Yair. Like a forgotten song suddenly remembered, and at first, he lingered after his deliveries, asking questions, listening, observing, then he stayed longer. He sat for a shiur, and soon he started to crave more. When he finally confessed to his parents that he'd been visiting yeshiva, his father erupted, "No son of mine will ever become backwards and a fanatic. You're forbidden from stepping foot into that place again." But something remarkable happened. The rage, instead of crushing Yair's curiosity, only deepened it. It was as if his father's fury revealed just how powerful the Torah encounters truly were. Yair began sneaking back quietly and carefully until one day he left home completely and disappeared. He left only a note and joined a yeshiva far away. But his freedom was short-lived. His father hired investigators, tracked him down, and brought him back by force. Enraged beyond words, he actually filed formal charges against the yeshiva, claiming they had brainwashed his 18-year-old son. The case made national headlines. Reporters, photographers, heated debate, and a crowded Israeli courtroom, packed wall to wall, waited to see what would unfold. Yair, he took the stand. And in a voice as steady as it was sincere, he said, "No one coerced me. No one manipulated me. I chose this path with full clarity. It's mine." And as he spoke, the judge, an elderly man with an inscrutable expression, kept shifting his gaze back and forth from Yair to Yair's father. He seemed distracted, preoccupied, as though a memory had stirred. And then, after Yair stepped down, the judge quietly called out, "Mr. Eitan, please approach the bench." There was silence. Then a strange question. "Are you of Eastern European descent? Perhaps your family name was once Stark?" Yair's father turned pale. "Yes," he whispered, "from Pinsk." The judge leaned back slowly in his chair, and his entire demeanor changed. Gone was the detached formality. His voice dropped, not in volume, but in weight. "I remember you, Mr. Eitan, or should I say Stark. You were born into one of the most respectable homes in all of pre-war Pinsk. Your father was known for his unwavering faith, and your mother, She was a woman of rare kindness. She cooked for the sick. She clothed the poor. She brought light wherever she went. He paused, and I remember how as a teenager you began to drift. You stopped keeping Shabbat, and I remembered the look in your parents' eyes, especially your mother's. Every Friday night she would light Shabbat candles. Then she would cry week after week, candle after candle. She cried for you. The room was still and not a breath stirred. I always wondered if her tears were ever heard, if the gates of heaven ever took notice, if her pain was ever answered. Then he turned and he locked eyes with Yair. And now I see 50 years later, her grandson has returned to the very light you abandoned. The elder judge inhaled deeply, then looked back at Mr. Eitan. You, sir, one shouted, I'm 18. I make my own decisions. You choose your path and you never looked back. And now you wish to strip that same freedom from your son because his path led him back to the Torah that you cast aside? He slowly reached for the gavel. This case should have never come before this court, not because of legal technicalities, but because Borei Olam already rendered its verdict. He raised the gavel high, case dismissed, and then he brought it down hard. The silence that followed wasn't the hush of shock. It was the silence that comes when heaven echoes in a courtroom. And the sound of one woman's Shabbat tears finally find its way home. Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments when the heavens speak, but only those with trained ears can hear. Shevet Gad taught us the secret. In a world filled with noise, rebellion, immorality, arrogance, they guarded their ears. They knew when to block out the world and when to open their hearts to the whispers of Kedusha. Yair Eitan was a boy raised in the shadow of cynicism. But he heard something different. Not a thunderous voice, not a dazzling voice, just the sound of emet. And truth, when it enters the ear, it reaches the soul. But perhaps the most breathtaking voice in this story wasn't spoken aloud at all. It was the sound of a Jewish grandmother's silence, her tears by the flickering flames, her whispered tefillot as she kindled the Neirot Shel Shabbat. No one in her home seemed to listen. Not her son, not her neighbors, perhaps not even herself, but Shemayim listened. And 50 years later, when those same flames were nearly extinguished, they reignited in her grandson. This is the secret of the Jewish woman. With just 2 candles, she brings the holy Shekhinah into the home. With a single tear, she can shift generations. And with a pure, unshaken heart, she can awaken souls she's never even met. And you want to know the most wondrous part? Her light, your light, never dies. It may flicker, it may vanish from the surface, but beneath the ash in the soul of a grandson, it still glows. So guard your ears, protect what enters your home, and never, ever underestimate the eternal reach of a woman's Shabbat candles, because sometimes, generations later, the very echo you thought was lost becomes the answer to a tefillah whispered by candlelight. Mika Amchi Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom Mivorach.